We are going to record the meeting, just FYI, it'll just be the slides and the sound, so that we can post it up into SharePoint so that you can go back and look at it later, or so that folks who weren't able to attend today can still have access to the recording. And we will also make the slideshow available for you guys as well, so that you'll have the slides with all the information on them. All right, so today we are going to dive right in with essentially an introduction to GIS. And then later in the year, with the rest of these lunch and learns, we're going to sort of expand past that. So leveraging GIS in your department, put your data on a map. We are going to introduce everybody to GIS. So here's essentially where we're going. We'll do a brief intro of what exactly is GIS, what do we do with it, what do those letters mean. We will look at sort of the particulars of being able to do GIS in the context of sort of a large organization. We will look at how various departments are using GIS within the county and in the town, just to kind of give you guys an idea of what's already being done. And then I'm actually going to do a demo for you guys. I'm going to set up a map. I'm going to do a few simple analysis things to get a final product to answer a question. And then I'll show you how to take that map and put it into something that you can use sort of outside of the GIS universe. After that, we will go over how to get started with this. I'll show you where the training account is located so you guys can play around with this. And then I've got sort of a very, very general sort of listing of some of the topics that we are going to cover later in the year, just so you can kind of get an idea of where we're going to be going next. And then, of course, at the very end, if you guys have any questions, we will definitely have a bit of time for some Q&A. All right, so what is GIS? Those are three letters, they stand for things. Geographic Information Systems is what the GIS stands for. And this system of information essentially comprises all three of those parts. At its most basic level, GIS is an information system. It's a database. It is a storage, location, and management system for data. And generally speaking, again, at its most basic level, that data is stored in the form of tables, right? So it's a whole bunch of tables. Some of them are related to one another. It can get very complicated, but essentially this is table data. We have columns of information, a whole bunch of rows. And the special part about this is the G, right? This is not just a bunch of tables. This is a bunch of tables where the information in there has some sort of spatial component. Usually, right? That spatial component could be a coordinate, lat long. That could be an address. There's a couple of other ways that that can be stored as well. Coordinates and addresses being the most common. But GIS is not picky. We can store all kinds of data in a GIS, even if it isn't spatial. So we definitely store spatial or non-spatial data in these systems as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. And we use this not only to manage and store the data itself, but sort of the pretty thing that we do, right? The sort of visual aspect of GIS is that we make maps, right? We take that data, we put it on a map so that we can see it. We are very visual creatures, so we like to see things in pretty colors and all of that. We can also take those maps and that information and then begin to analyze patterns and trends. And that can be as simple as just putting it on the map and then you with your human eyes and your human brain just looking at it for a second. You can start to see patterns and clusters and trends without the computer doing anything else other than displaying it in a slightly different way. Most of us kind of glaze over when we look at a big giant spreadsheets. So GIS can just be another way to visualize our data that makes us glaze over a little less. Obviously, this platform also contains some very powerful analytic tools so that if the patterns and trends and clusters and stuff are a bit more subtle than we are able to pick up on, we can, of course, have the computer do it for us. And those can be patterns in space. Those can also be patterns in the data behind the map as well. So some really, really cool analytics can be done there. And then once we have those analytic results, once we have our map, we know where the patterns are, we can use that information to make decisions, right? That's sort of the point of all of this. The point of having information and data is so that we can use it to make better decisions. Once the decisions have been made, or once the map has been created and it's beautiful, the platform also provides ways to get those results to other people, to take the results and share them. That could be within your department, that could be sending it up the chain, or that could be, since we are government, that could also be sharing that information with the public as well. All right, so now that we know sort of what GIS is and what we're doing with it, the process for using a GIS looks something kind of like this. I'm going to grab a laser pointer so that my mouse doesn't keep disappearing on me. So essentially, GIS data contains either explicitly spatial information, so an address or a lat-long coordinate or something like that, or it could be more implicit. So it could be the name of a neighborhood, or it could be a county or a state. It could be a zip code. It could be a census block, right? Those things don't allow you to plot a point in space, but because we have all of those things, we have zip code polygons, we have census blocks, right? County boundaries. We have all of those as explicitly spatial data. We can take that stuff that references that data and we can hook them together so that we can use that information that itself is not necessarily spatial, but it's related to something that is spatial. So again, at its very core, GIS is a database system. So we start out with reports, spreadsheets, tables in all different forms, right? These things could be coming from Excel. They could be coming from something in QuickBase. I know a lot of you guys are using QuickBase. QuickBase is tables too. It's really great. The two can talk to each other. It could be something stored in SharePoint. It could be coming from your local machine. It could be coming from a network drive someplace. GIS is not super picky about that part. It can interface with tables that come in a lot of different formats. Then we take those tables, we pull out the spatial information and we hand it to the software and we say, okay, make me a map. And it takes whatever spatial information is in there and it plots it on the map so that it all sort of meshes together and lays on top of each other in a geographically accurate way. Generally speaking, we are going to take several different kinds of data, several different layers, and overlay them on top of each other so that we can see how they relate to one another. Even if it's just within a single spreadsheet, seeing how the points relate to each other, right? Or it could be, seeing how, COVID infection data relates to sort of broader geography, right? Or to population demographics, right? We can take all of these pieces of information, lay them on top of each other, and then start to analyze, again, patterns, trends, clusters. We take all of those pieces of data, we lay them on top of each other, we make them look pretty, we give it a legend and a scale bar and some other stuff, and then we get a map. Then we're going to take that map, and that map can essentially be pushed out in all kinds of different formats for different purposes to be able to actually use the map. If the map is just for us, then we can just sit there and not do anything else with it. But if the map needs to be used in a more public context, or it needs some additional information associated with it, we can take that map and push it out to something like a dashboard, for example. A lot of us are pretty familiar with dashboards at this point in COVID. That's sort of been dashboards coming out party. Everybody knows about dashboards now, it's great. But a dashboard essentially takes that map portion and puts it in a layout of some kind with other information that's related to the map. So graphs, charts, lists of things, all sorts of metrics, so that we can look at the map and have this nice visual, but also get additional information that we're pulling out of those tables in graphical form or in a list. That's really good for analysis or for just having some really nice like heads up display kind of thing for situational awareness. We can also take a map and we can put it into an application. I like to think of these as boxes that we put maps in, and the box does something. Sometimes that function is just to display the map for you, let you zoom in and zoom out. But a lot of times it's more complicated than that. The box lets you search for an address and it tells you which school district that address is in, or it lets you make changes and edits to the data, or maybe it lets you click on a trail and see an elevation profile across that trail, right? Very, very focused functionality to do a specific thing, even if that specific thing is just show me the map and let me navigate around. These things are very broadly useful, and we'll talk about that when I do the demo. I'll show you how to make one of these. We can also take that map and push it out in formats that are useful in other kinds of devices and tools. So mobile devices, for example, are kind of a thing these days, and they're very handy for taking your maps outside of the office. You need to do data collection out in the field, for example. So there's other sorts of tools that can consume these maps on different devices, etc. All right, so because we are all working in a largish organization, it's not just one person here and one person over here using this GIS in a vacuum. There's this concept of enterprise GIS. And essentially, if it's just you all by yourself and nobody else needs to touch any of your stuff, it's you by yourself, you store your data locally, like on your computer, in your OneDrive or whatever. Security is fairly simple. You're working with a single piece of technology that doesn't necessarily need to talk to any other pieces of technology. And the GIS applications, for the most part, are going to be pretty standard. Generally speaking, this is not how any of us work. None of us work in a vacuum. So we have this enterprise concept over here, which means multiple users touching the same data at the same time. And we need for that to be able to happen without people getting in each other's way. The data library is centralized so that everybody can get access to it. We need to standardize security to make sure that, yes, we can access it, but we can only access the things we need to access. Sensitive data is protected, that kind of thing. We need to integrate multiple pieces of technology, right? Whether it's my laptop needs to be able to get to the server where the data lives, your computer needs to get to the server where the data lives, et cetera. And then this also allows us to create customized GIS applications that are more tailored to the things that we need to do with it. The benefits here are everybody is working off of the same set of information when making decisions, right? So the public health department is using the same set of COVID data as the behavioral health folks, right? Or the tax assessor's office is working off of the same parcel data as community development, right? We're all looking at the same information to make decisions, and that cuts down on confusion and data inaccuracies and all of that. It also allows us, especially with these customized GIS applications, it allows us to take this very complicated set of information and provide it to people with no formal GIS training in a format that is easily consumable. So we can take complicated set of data, simplify it down so that it's useful, but also not overwhelming. And again, these customized GIS applications are instrumental in that particular process. And here is some of the ways that GIS is being used both at the county level and the town. This is not an exhaustive list, obviously. And a lot of these pieces work together. Again, this is that enterprise concept. And I'm going to switch over to a pen here so that I can write things. So for example, the tax assessor's office, right, does parcel maintenance. The community development folks do permitting and code enforcement. We here at the GIS department do a lot of address management, but all of those things are related to each other, right? Somebody buys a piece of land, they have a parcel, but they need an address so that they can get electricity and water, and the fire truck can find their house when it catches on fire, right? All of these things have to be able to talk to each other. For example, the redistricting effort that we just finished a few weeks ago, looking at census blocks and populations, right? And being able to sort of put them into bins and group them together in various ways based on all kinds of different metrics. And that sort of feeds into election mapping and setting up voter precincts and all of that, right? Information that has to talk to each other. Over here, land use and zoning, planning, site evaluation, environmental assessments, right? All of that kind of goes together. All of those sets of data need to be able to talk to each other. And then we also have things like emergency response, hazard mitigation. During fire season, during COVID, right? We got to do a lot of this. And those two things need to talk to each other. And those two things also eventually probably need to talk to whatever systems we have set up for public notice and public outreach. So again, all these things need to be able to talk to each other, a central place where all of that data lives, and some kind of system in place for those pieces of data to be able to work together and to be analyzed together. I have some hyperlinks set up here. These are these orange underlined things. We've got some websites that you guys can take a look at that will show you kind of what these actually look like in real time. So ownership inquiries, that'll take you to the parcel viewer. We also have websites set up for all kinds of information about redistricting and about emergency response. So when we publish the PowerPoint slides later, you guys are free to click on those links and take a look at what that actually looks like in real life. All right, it is demo time, which is very exciting. Let me get my windows switched here. Okay, so this is what's called ArcGIS Online. You can see I'm in a web browser here. And this is a pretty simple mapping interface that has a little bit of analytic capability worked in. Is very, very useful. Especially I kind of call it GIS light, right? It doesn't require the learning curve that the big, complicated, scary desktop software does. It's a lot simpler than that, but still pretty powerful. And so what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you sort of the process for bringing in the information that we need, analyzing it, and then displaying it. So what we're going to do here is, I'm going to show you how I found this data, but let me explain what this is. So these are our supervisor districts from redistricting that we just came up with. These are the brand new ones for the whole county. We have zoomed in here on just the Mammoth Lakes area. And I also have a town boundary here. This is this light green line, and the urban limit here in the dashed line. And essentially what I want to do is I want to know what the populations are in these new supervisor districts, but just inside the Mammoth Lakes urban area, right? I don't want all of District 3. I just want the piece of District 3 that's inside that boundary. So there's a couple of different pieces of information here, and they all need to talk to each other. And I need to pull out a piece from one spot and a different piece from another spot and glue them together and analyze them. So that's what we're going to do. So firstly, I already have these things in the map, but let me show you how you would go about finding this stuff. So here are the three pieces of information I want to start with. I want to start with census blocks because that's where my population information lives. I've got my supervisor districts. These are these big colorful things. And then I have the municipal boundary, which gives me that urban limit. And all of this is hosted by the county GIS department. You guys all have access to all of this. So up here, I could say search for layers. And it may take some looking around because you may not know exactly what the thing you're looking for is called. So like, for example, if I was looking for the urban limit, that's probably what I would type in here. And I might not necessarily find it. It may take some, your Googling skills will come in very handy here. But like census blocks, that'd be pretty easy, right? I could just put in census blocks. And there's a couple of things I might have to look through here. Block demographics, it's going to be in here somewhere. We've got a lot of redistricting stuff in here that's sort of crowding it. 2010 census blocks. I saw the 2020 ones in here somewhere. There we go. Mona County 2021 census blocks with demographics. So you'd hit the little plus and it would add the layer to your list. And then I could do that for my the urban limit as well. So there's a bunch of different ways that you could look for that. Let's see. Yeah, so urban district with population, I think that's one of my layers. Neighborhoods. planning districts, water districts. So again, this one is a little bit less obvious as to how you would find it, but there's a search here and you can look through all of the stuff that is in, that is served out by the organization. So I've got these 3 layers in here. I've got them turned on. I've got them symbolized the way I want them. So what I want to do again is get population information for just the portions of these supervisor districts that are inside of the urban portion of Mammoth Lakes. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is get rid of the data I don't need. So this municipal boundaries layer has the town boundary, which is this outer portion, and it also has the urban limit. I just want the urban limit. So I can create a filter that will get rid of the stuff I don't need. So I can look in that layer and I only want the urban limit. And then I say apply the filter, and it still shows up in my legend here, but that light green outline has gone away. So I just have the piece that I need. A little bit here. There we go. Okay, so I've gotten rid of the extraneous stuff. Probably when I bring these supervisor districts in, they're already going to have their pretty colors. But if they don't, you can go to these little building blocks here. And there's all kinds of different things that you can do. You can adjust the colors here. You can adjust the order that they show up in, transparency, all kinds of stuff. And we'll look at that in just a second as well. So I've got my municipal boundaries filtered. The next thing I need to do is I'm going to pull out the population information, again, limited to just these areas. Then I'm going to pull the area itself, the actual polygons, and then I'm going to glue them together, right? So I'm going to do the table part and then the spatial part and then glue them together. So I'm going to do the population bit first. And the way I'm going to do that is with something called, got my analysis tools up here, something called summarize within. And essentially what that's going to do is it is going to take these census blocks. These are these gray outlines here. This is where our population information lives. Show you that. Okay, so here's total population and a bunch of demographics as well for each of these blocks. A lot of them are 0 because it's a very rural county, but like here's one with 2 people. The urban ones have more. There's one with 9, right? So essentially, I'm taking all these blocks that are in the green area and totaling up this column. And what this summarize within tool does is it's going to look at some of these census blocks where part of the census block is in the urban area and part of it isn't. What it's going to do is it is going to try to estimate the percentage of the area of that block that's in my boundary and essentially take the population and divide that out, right? So if this is, say, 80% of the census block is in the boundary, it'll take the total population and give me 80% of it. So this is not super precise because that assumes the population is evenly distributed, which is patently false, but it'll get us pretty close. It'll get us a good estimate. That's what this tool is going to do for us. So we have to feed it the information that it needs. So what kind of area are we using? We can use a layer we've already got. It can also do a regular uniform square grid or a hexagonal grid. But we have a polygon. We have this municipal boundary right here. So I'm going to hit the drop down and find it in the list. There it is right there. And then the layer to summarize, right, where the information is coming from are these gray census blocks. There they are right there. And then it wants to know, what do we want to know from those census blocks? So we select a column from our table. In this case, this is total population. And then what do we want to know about total population, right? There's a whole bunch of different statistical values we can select. We want an average or min-max. We want the sum, right? We want to take total population from this block and add it to total population from this block and this block and this block, right? But we only wanted to do that within these colored areas, right? Within a supervisor district. So we want this block to be added to this block, but not to this red block over here, right? We want to divide it out. that is this group by option down here. I want to group this by supervisor district. Okay. And then it's going to make a new layer for us, a new piece of data. We can give it a name, and then we're going to hit run. Since we're doing this on the internet and not the sort of local processing power on my computer, I'm not going to run this live because it'll take a minute. If you want to do this yourself, just be prepared for it'll take a minute. But when I run that tool, I get this table down here. It's called a summary table. And it gives me exactly what we wanted it to, right? Here are population sum. Okay, we'll figure out the decimals in a minute. And then those population sums are separated out by supervisor district. Okay. But this is non-spatial essentially, right? This is what some of that stuff we mentioned earlier that's sort of implicitly spatial. These district numbers reference these big polygons in here, and later we can use those to hook it up. So now we've got the numerical part of this done. Now we need to do the geographic part. So essentially what we're going to do is we are going to use this dotted green outline for the urban limit as a cookie cutter. And our cookie dough is all of these supervisor districts, these big polygons. We're going to cut them down so that they just fit inside of this boundary. This is a very common thing to do in GIS. It's called an overlay. Very, very, very common, but very powerful. So here's our overlay tool. And this overlay tool can do several different things at once. So just like with the summarize, we have to feed it the information that it needs to run. So our input layer is our supervisor districts. And our overlay layer is going to be that municipal boundary. Okay, here's our cookie cutter, here's our cookie dough. And then once it has put the cookie cutter in the cookie dough, what do we want to keep? So in our case, we just want to keep the cookie, right? That's this intersect. We want to keep this dark part in the middle. We have some other options as well. We can keep the stuff outside the cookie cutter, the scraps, or we could keep all of it. It just kind of depends on what we want to do. So we just want to keep the cookie. And then again, down here, it's going to create a new piece of data. You give it a name so it can be saved. And you run it. And again, I'm not going to run it because it'll take a sec. And what it spits out is something that looks like this. Okay, so if we turn all the rest of this stuff off, it's these couple of blue polygons. So it's the supervisor district boundaries, but they're chopped off at the urban limit. Okay, and if we look at this table, right, it still gives us those supervisor districts. And it also gives us this total population. But if you look at these are total populations for the entire supervisor district. We're not actually going to use those. We want the total population numbers from this table that we made earlier. And if you look at these, the numbers are quite different, right? They're quite a bit smaller because it's a smaller proportion of those big supervisor districts. So we have the geographic piece, we have the numerical piece. Now we need to take these two things and hook them together. And we're going to do that by referencing the district number. It's in this table. It's also in the table behind these. And this is called a table join. And again, this is a very common thing to do, even in just non-geographic databases. Joining tables together is very, very common. So target layer, this is the layer that's accepting the extra information. In this case, this is these urban districts. We want to give the population information to these polygons. Layer to join to the target layer is our urban population summary. And then several different kinds of relationships here. If this is two spatial layers that are related to each other, we would choose this option. But we're not actually using the geography to make this link. We are actually using the tables. So we're going to say choose fields to match. And we essentially just need the matching field in one table and the matching field in the other table. So here it's going to be our supervisor districts. And in the other table, it's going to be districts. It's also supervisor districts. Okay, so it takes those two and it uses that to link the tables together. This is the nature of the join. Essentially, there's one thing in one table that links with one thing in the other table. It's a very simple relationship. And then same thing, right? We're going to make an output. We name it so it can be saved. and we run it, which we're not doing. And this gives us something that looks like this, which if I adjust the symbology, essentially looks the same. The geography hasn't been changed. We didn't add anything to that. We did, however, add something to the table. So here's supervisor district in the native table. Here's the supervisor district in the foreign table. It matches. Here's that total district population, but again, we're not using that. That was in there before. But if we scroll to the end of the table, we see all the new stuff. Here is that smaller population number. Okay, and that's what we're really after. So now that this is in this table, now we can do some cartography. Now we can take these boring blue polygons and give them these cool colors again, right? So we can go in here to these symbols, and essentially I want to pull a piece out of the table and use that to define what color things are. And that is going to be the supervisor district, which is somewhere. Did I miss it? There it is. Okay, and then give it a second to think. And there's several symbology schemes in here. I'm going to use this one at the bottom that gives us something that looks like that. And the colors aren't right. They don't match the original, but I could go in here and I could fix that. I could change the colors around. Okay, but again, anything that is labeled with a 1, the software says gets to be red. Anything that is listed with a 5, the software says gets to be purple. And again, I can go in and change those around. I can make them be whatever I want. And I could end up with something that looks like this. I'll show you the labels here in a second, but I have changed those colors so that they match our original map. Okay, so same colors as the original map, but again, now these polygons are clipped off at that urban boundary. So then if we want to get these nice population numbers actually on the map, again, just like with symbols, it's in the table. We just have to tell the software to pull it out of the table and then print it on the map for us. And so the way that we do this is I say create labels, and then I tell it which part of the table to pull that information from. So any column in that table is fair game. I happen to want this sum P0001, which is our condensed population number. Several fonts to choose from: size, style, color. You can put a halo around it. It looks like that, which is helpful in some cases. And then you say, okay. And then you get these nice little pieces of text. Now, because of the way that summary tool works, we have decimals of people, which that's not a thing. Percentages, decimals of people, and it makes the number look more confusing than it really should be. So what I can do is I can go in here and I can, don't worry about how I'm doing this for the moment. It's a little bit backwards. I can go in here, find that place in the table, that field in the table, and the default for numerical fields in here is 2 decimal places. But humans are whole things. We are integers. So I'm just going to tell it, I don't need those 2 decimal places. Just give me 0. And say okay to that. And I have to go back into the label area, get this to update. There we go. So now I have whole rounded numbers that look a lot nicer, are easier to read, and make more sense for measuring humans. Okay. And then if I were to change those colors around, again, to match the original supervisor districts, I would get something that looks like this. Okay, so that was a couple of steps, some analysis tools, some cartography, right? Some altering of sort of the look and feel of the map. Now we have this nice thing that could actually be used for whatever we're going to use it for. Now, the easiest way to make this broadly useful, referring people to this map is going to be difficult. You have to have an ArcGIS login to be able to get to this spot right here. But if you take this map and you put it into an application, that application can be shared just with a URL, right? You take the URL and you hand it to somebody, or you embed it in a website. So we're going to hit the share button right here. And I'm going to say, create a web app. And then there's a whole bunch of things to choose from here. for different purposes, right? So an application is a box that you put a map in, and the box does something. And it depends on what you want people to be able to do with your map. This map could be for viewing charts of the data in there. It could be specifically for looking at imagery. There's one in here that's like a time slider. I think it's further down. Come on, there it goes. Yeah, like here, if you have time data that's looking at different slices of time, there's like an animation thing in there. All kinds of different, very specific purposes. You also have something like this minimalist one that is just going to show you the map and the legend and let you zoom in and zoom out. That's really all I need here, right? I don't need to clutter it up with all these extraneous tools. So I'm going to select that one, say create a web app. And again, you got to give it a name so it can be saved. Please do a better job than I did. Metadata is important, y'all. All right, so it's going to open up this configuration area, which is quite simple and very cool. So there are steps 1, 2, 3, and 4. Some apps have more steps, but they'll be labeled just like this. And then this right-hand portion is essentially a preview of what the app's going to look like. And I still have some extraneous stuff in here. So I am going to, oh, dang it. This is what I get for doing live demos. Sorry, guys. I need to go back in to my map and I need to save it. Saving is very important. Okay, and really all I'm going to do is just turn on that final layer, and I'll leave the census blocks turned on for reasons. Okay, let's save that, and then let's try this again. Apologies, I'm doing this on a trackpad, so I'm a little more clumsy with my mouse than I would be normally. Okay, now it shows us what we want to see and not all that extra stuff. And for some reason, it's not pulling the correct labels, but I'll investigate that later. All right, so you can play around with this as you make changes to how the application is set up. So this is live, you can interact with it. So step 1 is the map. So we've already got a map, so we're good. We can hit next. Step 2 is the stuff, the widgets that are in here. Select which panel to open at start. There are 2 panels. There's a legend panel and a details panel. Because I didn't put any metadata in there, I didn't put in a summary or a description, there's nothing in here. Really what we want out of this thing is the legend panel. So the legend panel is enabled, it's turned on. I could enable the layer list, which would let people turn on some of those additional layers that were in there if I wanted. There's a pop-up panel, so somebody could click on something and get some more information. And then there's the details panel as well. And again, my details panel doesn't have anything in it, so I'm gonna turn it off. And as you can see, it's this little tab right here, and I turn it off and the tab goes away. Then I can say next. And step 3 is all about the search bar, which is right here. So do you want the search bar at all? Yes, good. Open it at the start or make somebody actually click on it. And in that case, if you turn that off, somebody would actually have to click on the little magnifying glass. I usually leave it on. It doesn't take up that much space. It's not intrusive. And then you can say next. And then you have your like look and feel stuff, right? So you have a light theme and a dark theme. You can switch between them. I like the dark one. And then you have placement for all of your various tools, right? So top left is the home button right there and the zoom controls. Top right is your search stuff. Bottom left is your scale bar. There it is right there. And then there's nothing bottom right, right? So you can kind of pick these things up and drag them to different places if you want to switch them up. So if I wanted the scale bar bottom right instead, I could drag it over there and it has moved itself to the other side of the map. Okay, so you can configure that a little bit. The defaults are usually pretty good. That's it. There's only 4 steps. I am officially done. It does auto save as you go. Down here, there's a little save icon, but it says draft, which means this thing is not live yet. you have to hit publish when you're done. And it thinks for a second. And essentially it's setting up the place where this thing is going to live for the rest of its life. You are still the only person who can see it at the moment. That's what this message is. But if you need to share it with your coworkers or with the public, you can click on this link. It'll take you to the sharing settings and you get to decide who sees it and who doesn't. And then when you're satisfied there, what's really important on this little screen is that this provides you with the link to this application. It's just a URL. There's a button right here that will go ahead and copy it to your clipboard, and then you can do a Control-V and paste it literally anywhere. You can put it into an email to send to somebody. You can put a link to it in a website if you wanted. You can also, if you scroll down here, it has also provided code for actually embedding the application itself into a website, for example. So all of that stuff is created when you hit that publish button. Before you do that, none of this exists yet. So I could go ahead and launch the app from here, or I could just close this. And let me show you how this works. So I can open up a brand new browser tab. I can do a Control-V and paste that link in there. And as soon as I do that, it opens up my app, fully functional and ready to go. Right? So as long as you just send somebody that URL, they should have access to be able to use this app, as long as you have shared it with them. All right, I think that's all I wanted to go over for the demo. I'm going to move right along here. All right, so if you want to play around with ArcGIS online, we do have a training account for exactly that purpose. Username and password are right here. And then if you go to this link, there's instructions for getting logged in, the website you have to go to and all of that stuff. Esri, the company that produces ArcGIS and ArcGIS Online, has a couple of YouTube videos all over the place for just sort of basics on how to make a map, how to make an app, the stuff that I just went over. If you decide this is something you want to use on the regular, just contact us, send us an email, give us a call, and we can get you set up with either a department or account or your own personal account so that you can start making stuff and saving it, right? So you have your own personal stuff. And then I would also encourage you guys to take a look. This is from Esri's website as well, but it's a whole bunch of essentially user submitted things that have been done with GIS that are really cool. So if you think this might be pretty cool, but you're not quite sure how you can use it in your department, I'd encourage you to go and take a look at some of the examples there. There's a ton that come from local government. So that's some good like inspo right there. And then for continuing this series, again, this is not an exhaustive list. These are just some of the big points. We are going to do some more in-depth training on ArcGIS Online. So we'll kind of slow down and go through the actual steps for making a map and doing symbology and display stuff, doing analysis, right? We'll kind of go over the more specifics on that stuff. We'll do some more with sort of advanced app making. There's things called story maps that are really, really cool. We're also planning on doing a little intro to the parcel viewer. And I know a lot of you guys are already using the parcel viewer, but there's some other like secret things. They're not secret, but some lesser known cool things you can do with the parcel viewer. And we want to make sure you know about those. Collecting data in the field, and then some more advanced GIS things for folks who are maybe already using GIS and want to get better at it. So some data management best practices, problem solving with GIS, which is essentially how do you come up with the list of tools, like for the series of tools that I just ran to solve a problem, right? Here's the problem, here's the answer that I need. What tools do I need to use and in what order, right? That is like 90% of the effort, honestly. And then for those who are working in ArcMap, which is the older desktop software, we are trying to kind of gently lead everybody to the new next gen desktop software called ArcGIS Pro. But there is a bit of a learning curve to switching. So we want to make sure that you guys know exactly where your buttons went and how to do your work in this new version of ArcGIS. And I promise you guys are going to love it once you get used to it. So the dates are going to be TBA. We are going to be conducting these approximately monthly, and we'll announce those dates once we set them up. We also have a survey that we will send out to everybody that just is sort of inquiring about how you're using GIS in your department right now, how you think you might want to use GIS, so that we can kind of take this list and tailor it to you guys a little bit, so that we are making sure that we are teaching you how to do the things that you actually need and want to know how to do. So expect that survey in your inbox later this afternoon, and we'd really appreciate your input on that so that we can make sure that we are helping you guys the way you need to be helped. And that's all I've got. I will stop my screen share, and if anybody has any questions, you are welcome to ask them. Questions, comments, rotten fruit, or no? All right, let's see. You're welcome to put them in the chat as well if you don't want to unmute yourself. John, if you're trying to ask a question, you are still muted. All right, if there aren't any questions, we'll go ahead and close out the meeting. Oh, hi, did you have a question?
I don't have a question. I just want to say great application, great tool, and great presentation today.
Awesome,
there was one question in the chat, Lauren, the difference between urban boundary and town limits.
So the town limit is essentially the sort of full jurisdiction of Mammoth Lakes. It includes some of the rural areas close to the town, includes mostly areas kind of to the south and like up towards the scenic loop, whereas the urban boundary is just the places where there are people and infrastructure, roads, houses, buildings, things like that. Yeah, no problem. Any other questions, comments?
This was recorded and will be sent out with a link soon, right?
Yes, we're going to be storing it in the IT SharePoint, but we will send out a link where to find both that and the actual PowerPoint presentation as well. You'll have that this afternoon.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Amanda, if you're asking a question, you are muted. All right. Any other questions before I close the meeting out? All right, I'm going to go ahead and shut down the meeting. Look in your inbox for later this afternoon. I will send out the link to this recording and the PowerPoint presentation. And I will also send out a link to the survey so you can let us know what you would like to see from these lunch and learns in the future. And thanks everybody for coming, and hopefully we'll see you sometime next month.